So let's start off with the principles that we need to make sure are in place. And again, I've lent on the FinOps Foundation here, who developed 6 key principles, all of which are required for your FinOps function to succeed. Firstly, we need to make sure that all the teams involved are collaborating and communicating effectively. Traditionally, finance, we tend to be seen as one of the slower moving functions, and this is usually driven by the fact that we work on a monthly, quarterly, and even annual deadlines, and our reporting structures are very much built with this in mind. However, to really embrace cloud, we need to remember that it's all about the now, and we need all the teams working together at the same pace. Likewise, we need the engineering teams and operations to be very aware of finance's expectations, and effectively we just need to make sure that everybody is talking the same language, and we're doing so on a real-time basis. One of the easiest ways that we've found of making this this collaboration very clear is starting right at the beginning as part of the budgeting process, and sharing all of the assumptions and calculations and the mechanics of what's driving the forecast, the numbers, and the modelling going forward. Doing this with it, we're hoping to upskill the engineers to give them a bit more awareness of the impacts of what their actions will be having going forward. But it's also a natural way of allowing the technical leads to lean back into a function such as finance and advise on a better, more accurate approach to help with ongoing planning and analysis. This collaboration will need to evolve as the level of FinOps evolves, as we move forward on the maturity level, which we'll cover later. And taking my previous example, getting that initial simple breakdown from the technical teams is paramount, and then you'll go on and refine that as you develop the function going forward. The one key thing that we need to make sure though with the team's collaboration is by adding more people in, more communication links, etc. We don't want to limit anything to do with speed or innovation. Obviously a key driver of putting it in cloud. So whether that's if you've got long reporting lines, you want to look at reducing those, and also don't get encumbered by anything to do with approvals or authorizations. Next, we have the point that all of our decisions need to be driven with an underlying understanding of how they provide value and how cloud is providing that value, should I say. So to help refine our decision-making process, we're going to need to increase all of our reporting when it comes to trends and variances. Naturally, going back to the 3-stage model, which we will go back to in a minute, this falls mainly into the inform stage of the life cycle. It's also important to remember that cloud is a value enabler and not just a cost center. Although costs could be increasing with your cloud spend, this could actually be the best problem you have, because along with those costs increasing, you've got matched increases in revenues and subsequent margins. Linking back to the previous principle that I mentioned with collaborate, you'll be able to, you do need to build a culture of sharing these value levers and making sure that we're benchmarking these impacts both internally and externally. The third principle I want to cover is we need to ensure that everyone takes ownership of their own cloud usage. This point again is linked mainly to getting better insights and reporting to what we need to do to make sure that we are sharing everything with individuals, and that's individuals across all levels in the organisation, but we're sharing them to give them a real sense of ownership of their slice of cloud. So a good analogy to draw here is if I was to ask you to look after an antique vase, I'm sure that where you would place it, how you would move it, how often you would check on it would vary greatly if I told you it was worth £5 if I told you it was 500,000. Your behaviour for both of these scenarios would be perfectly linked to helping you manage the different levels of risks for each scenario. So again, with this principle, it's much as about building an optimal culture and empowerment for individuals as it is about your specific reporting or operational requirements. The next principle is that reporting needs to be timely and accessible. As people will be making real-time changes in the cloud environment, we need to make sure that the financial impacts of such decisions are being clearly communicated, so we can continue to sort of hone in and dial in when comparing performance measures on the value and associated costs. What we can't afford to do is wait for a monthly billing cycle to sort of learn your mistakes that way, because by that point you're 4 weeks too late potentially. Now, saying that, all businesses would love to move to a reporting environment showing real costs per hour, with great pie charts and dashboards all shared centrally, which, although extremely valuable if you can get it right, these are only ever going to be as accurate as the data that's going into them. If there is any doubt on this data being inaccurate, you will run the risk of individuals and teams rejecting this data and then effectively becoming more siloed, which is the opposite effect of what we want. We also run the risk at this point in providing too much complex, what we would call noisy data in volumes that might be totally unmanageable. And in doing so, we're not presenting that that empowerment or that clear messaging that we need to do to make sure that we're managing our cloud spend appropriately. One possible way to sort of alleviate the focus is having anomaly reporting, which ensures that we maintain control, but aims to distract the engineers and the guys in the tools, as it were, as little as possible. Finally, one potential point of resistance on this reporting point is that costs will need to be shared accurately and fairly. Otherwise, again, this will undermine the process. A key principle that we can borrow from the financial planning world is the controllability principle. And this is where you cannot give someone a budget unless you give them the ability to control their actual spend. And we'll be covering some good examples of cost allocation in a later slide. Next, our fifth principle is a centralized FinOps team. So although so far we've really been focusing on building this culture of empowerment, a centralized FinOps team ensures that the broader strategic goals and the background behind them, the move of cloud is being fulfilled in a timely and correct manner. And naturally, as well, a team sitting over the top of this really would have more negotiating power, and we'll be looking at finding all of these economies of scale where possible. This team is also going to be your steward and your unbiased decision maker when it comes to resolving and allocating all of these, apportioning the unallocated spend, which we'll cover again later. And a key question that we often get is, what would we expect a FinOps team to look like, and how would it be composed? Realistically, a dedicated, a team of dedicated finance practitioners would be found in enterprise-sized organisations. However, it is possible with the right guidance and drawing on external resources as well, and including colleagues from various departments, being engineering, ops, finance, and product teams, that a sufficient team can operate. But the key underlying thing that is needed for all of these is it does need that overarching executive sponsorship from the SLT. And finally, we have the requirement that we need to be leveraging the variable cost model of cloud. So going back to the traditional view that I showed earlier, it's really essential that no one slips back into that traditional approach. Time and time again, we have worked with organisations who really fail in certain areas of the business to really embrace the variable nature of cloud. And coming from some of the financial background myself, I do agree that cloud is often seen as a volatile cost because it moves up and down. But it's really going to be only going to be as volatile as your sales performance or your customer churn or the overall growth of your services. So it's all very manageable and expected. The key metric that we need to focus on with the variable cost model is that we don't need to really focus on why have our costs increased from last month, or how have they increased, should I say. But what we need to be doing is really focusing that the costs are appropriately set up to match the current demand today, and are we getting all the efficiencies that we can.